If you haven't met me already, I'm Vicky's cousin. I'm Julie. And I have a few points of order that I hope to remember to say before we get started. There will be music alternating with speakers. You know that Vicky was a singer and a great lover of vocal music. And Emily, who has done so much to organize this, is also a singer and has organized beautiful music, which I hope which I know that you will enjoy. There will be the chairs and tables will be rearranged afterwards so that you won't be stuck sitting like this was for the fire marshal. There will be canapés served during the event and also afterward. And when it's over, if you can, please stay for another glass of wine. So I'm Vicky's cousin. She and my mother, Kit, who's right here, were first cousins. Sorry, I'm a writer. I'm not an academic, so I'm not really very good at speaking without notes. I write it down and I read it. I live in the Netherlands. I live in Amsterdam. So when I moved there, I became her nearest relative, literally. And we got to be good friends as well, because she wasn't really attached to family, but if, she could get you in her friend zone, then that was where, that was, I think, a place that meant a great deal to her. She was the child of two parents who were very different from each other and also from her. And she looked around as a kid and she thought, this life that they are living is not for me. And, she never married and she never had children. And that was very deliberately her choice, because she did not want the roles that she had seen growing up. And she set out to do something new, to do something different. And part of that, I think, was developing this kind of wonderful network of friends. She had a great gift for friendship, as you know. And for me, it's been kind of a huge pleasure to get to know all of you, to get to know her friends through your memories of her, and to hear what she was like for you. And I had a lot of course, the same experience as you of being, whisked off to galleries to see a show. I would often, if I needed to be in London, I would call up and she would let me sleep on her living room floor, and we'd have breakfast looking out over Hampstead Heath and enjoying her wonderful view together. I hope you, in listening to each other's stories, to the speakers tonight and just talking to each other, will have that same feeling of good fortune of having been her friend. She liked to tell stories about herself. One of the stories that she told was about, she was on the tube once and she was looking over somebody's shoulder at some economics software, and she asked him if it was any good. And he said, "Are you an economist?" She said, "Yes." And he said, "Are you a working economist?" And she sort of thought very quickly about all the possible answers that she could give to that question. And he said, she glared at him. She was a very good glarer. And said, "I'm Victoria Chick." And he became very humble. And I love that story, partly because I'm a member of the Chick family. So I felt this great family pride when she said that. And also because I feel like she devoted her life to being as much Victoria Chick as she possibly could. And I think that she accomplished a great deal in that line. And, you know, it was my great good fortune to be part of that. As part of that, she did value her independence enormously. And that made it hard for her at the end of her life to ask for help, or even, I think, really, it was hard for her to acknowledge that she was nearing the end. And so she didn't leave a lot of instructions. She didn't leave a lot of instructions for those of us who ended up stepping up more or less because we were there and taking care of her. She was fantastically well cared for by her good friend Gaynor Humphreys. And she and who found Emily for her to be her secretary. And Emily went through her Vicky's address book with her and found tiny notes on bits of paper with email addresses and telephone numbers, and managed to, gather all of you and inform as many of you as she could that the end was near. And if she didn't let you know, I'm really sorry. It wasn't through lack of desire on Vicky's part or ours. She was nearly blind towards the end. It was difficult for her. She had stopped being able to answer her email. It was difficult for her to maintain contact. And we've done our best. And, thank you so much to Emily. Thank you to everyone, all the good friends who've helped to organize this, Jeff Tiley and Sheila and Young, Penny Hawkins for suggesting the date. And yeah, I'm very glad you're here.
My name's Sheila Dow. I'm an academic economist from the University of Stirling. And I had the great fortune to be a friend of Vicky's for a long time and to be able to work together with her on many projects, which was a tremendous honor, of course. Now, Vicky was an exceptional person. I mean, in some ways that doesn't seem a strong enough way of putting it, but she was absolutely exceptional. She had an outstanding intellect and a very innovative way of thinking And as a result, she produced a body of work which has influenced people around the globe to improve their way of thinking about economics and to make their own additions to it. She was hugely knowledgeable, and not just about economics. I mean, as has been referred to already, anybody who's been around a museum with her learned so much. I mean, I really enjoy Flora Danica porcelain now in a way that I never would have done if I hadn't gone around examining it with Vicky and being told all about it by Vicky. She was also extraordinary in her kindness and in her sense of fun. And this really endeared her to children as well as adults. I include my two in those, and I know there are other colleagues' children who were similarly endeared by Vicky. So that's a pretty rare combination to make for an exceptional person. Now, I met Vicky first at a seminar in the University of Glasgow in the late 1970s, but I'd come across her earlier, and she always seemed to like this story, which kind of implied that her influence had seeped into many corners of the world. I was working as a civil servant in Winnipeg in Canada, and a colleague of mine from Morocco had found her first book, The Theory of Monetary Policy, and told me all about it. And this was wonderful. It was such a refreshing new way of thinking about monetary policy, which set Vicky off in a whole train of work that followed. But it really established her as an underground figure in economics, which so many of us appreciated. As time went on, she became above ground, much thanks to her own efforts, so that now a lot of her ideas are much more widely spread then. But they had to start somewhere, and we're so grateful that she started it off. Now, she spent her career developing economics in a way that differed from the mainstream. But she didn't just do it herself. She was so generous in the way that she helped other people develop their ideas. I'm one of the beneficiaries of that. She would do it by critical assessment, but it was always constructive criticism. I mean, my first single-authored book, she very kindly read the manuscript and told me it needed toughening up. And she was right. And I did it. And it seems to have struck a chord with quite a few people. So I really have Vicky to thank for that. Of course, her critical assessment of people's work wasn't just about the grand ideas, which you'd think would be the most important thing, but also about the grammar. And I continue to pause when I put in a comma or I use the word but, and I think whether Vicky would approve of this or not. So, and I should also mention, of course, that when she was encouraging other people's work, this applied particularly to younger scholars and most recently to the Rethinking Economics group. And you could really see the pleasure that she derived from engaging with younger scholars. Now, her approach to economics was also evident in the way that she dealt with work anonymously as a referee for academic journals. And I remember her telling me that she had a two-stage approach. The first stage was to read a paper from the perspective of the author, try and get inside their head and understand what it was they were getting at. And only then to read it from her perspective, and on that basis to provide some critical comments. when we talk about perspective, I should say that this was one of the things that made our collaborations so easy, that we shared a perspective on economics and how to do economics, the philosophy of economics. So there was an awful lot of ground that was established. We didn't have to talk about it. We could just talk about where to go next. So that was very helpful. She also was attracted to the fact that I shared a star sign with her. I'm not sure if that means good collaboration or not. I don't know if anybody knows about these things to say. Now, most of her work was focused on the work of John Maynard Keynes. And she built a tremendous reputation as a wonderful interpreter of Keynes, but particularly as an interpreter who would take Keynes's ideas and adapt them to modern circumstances, which is precisely what the way Keynes thought about economics, that this is what one should be doing. Develop theory within particular circumstances, but then see how new changes in circumstances require changes in theory. But she also shared with Keynes the love of the finer things of life. For Vicky, music was clearly very much one of those things. Another was building and nurturing friendship, something from which we have all benefited. So to sum up, hers was a good life.
I'm Alan Freeman. I'm the remaining honorary life vice president of the Association for Heterodox Economics and a fellow Aries sign. Vicky was the first. We enjoyed a collaboration and a friendship stretching over 2 decades. The best way I can explain what Vicky was to me and what I hope she was to you too is that she was a genius. Not just in the modern sense of an entirely original, inspirational, and unique contributor to human knowledge, but the original Latin sense of genius locus, the spirit of a place. Vicky, for me, was the spirit of London. The day out was the high point of any visit, whether it was to the National Gallery, the British Library, the Royal Academy tea rooms, the churches of St. Stephen's, a hidden gem of an eating place, or chalking lines on the legs of man spreaders on the London Underground. I remember her also as the spirit of pluralism. Her genius took a particular and unique form. It went beyond her formidable contribution to post-Keynesian economics to include that rare ability to celebrate and encourage everyone she worked with, whether or not she agreed with them. In short, Vicky possessed that extraordinarily rare talent. She knew how to disagree. This is because for her, controversy was not, as so often in economics, the means to dispense with an adversary, but the path to knowledge. Vicky enjoyed nothing more than a controversy. We locked horns in long transatlantic conversations about equilibrium, Marx, Keynes, the stationary state, ecology, Newton's Unitarianism, and the interpretation of scriptures and texts. And more often than not, we didn't agree on a single point. Yet I swear, I certainly emerged more knowledgeable and with a deeper understanding than I would have ever have got from talking to someone I agreed with. Vicky was a true pluralist. She defended, in the spirit of Voltaire, not just the right of dissent, but the necessity of it. She encouraged me to submit text after text for publication, as I'm sure many of her students will testify, which I would otherwise have abandoned. She saved me on more than one occasion when my own self-appointed adversaries sought to deal with my criticisms by the traditional method in economics of preventing them being published. Courageously, she took this point of making it clear to publishers that if my work was excluded, hers would be withdrawn. This is beyond genius. This is heroism. One experience for me sums up Vicky Chick, which was a seminar on pluralism in economics, where for some reason I've forgotten, perhaps somebody in the audience will remember and remind me. So I'm sorry if I got the narrative wrong, but this is how I remember it, that someone marked, God knows what they will make of all this. And I flippantly responded, I doubt God is listening. Vicky simply interjected, how do you know? As befits the genius of this place, my alma mater, I feel sure Vicky is with us today. If you choose to gainsay that and tell us she is gone, I can only reply with their own words, how do you know?
Hello, everyone. I'm Joe from Rethinking Economics, and just wanted to share a few reflections about Vicky today. I'm sad not to be able to say these things to her, but like Alan said, I feel like she's here with us and in this building, and so I hope she can hear. I think I first met Vicky about a decade ago. She came to Manchester to talk at an event. It started with a member of the Manchester Economics Department talking, and then Vicky stood up and she put away her seat and she came and sat on the front of the table as if she was just talking to one of us. And she had this incredible energy. And she proceeded to tell us the story of the three blind men who each touch a different part of the elephant. And one of them thinks the trunk is a tree, and the other one thinks the tail is a broomstick, and the other one thinks that the can't remember what the other one thinks. But I'm not as good at telling stories as Vicky. And this was, she then spoke for about 15 minutes and compellingly made the case for pluralism in economics. And you can see the economist from the Manchester Economics Department. She's actually, there's a video of this on YouTube, but her face her face fools as Vicky makes this case for what the economics department weren't doing. But more important almost than what Vicky said was her coming along, making the journey from London and being there. We were a group of 20-something students trying to challenge our department. We had no idea of all of this history that came before us. And Vicky's presence was so important to helping us understand that we were onto something important and that what we were arguing for was intellectually justified and morally justified. And so that first, I will never forget that first talk that she came to do for us. Later on, she was part of the Rethinking Economics Advisory Board. She would come up about once every 6 months to Manchester, and we would talk for about 2 or 3 hours. We'd go through what we were doing, and she'd share a kind of vast wealth of experience and critical feedback, reflections. She was very diligent in our role. One time we didn't organize the meeting on time, and I got an email from her saying, are we going to have a meeting? But, you know, the energy that she showed, I think for me, her fierce commitment to change and her fierce commitment to a better world inspires me. I think maybe when I'm Victoria's age, part of me will want to retire, but then another part of me will think about what Vicky did and the way that she kept on going and kept on supporting us and kept on pushing for that change that she believed was so needed. Even after that, we built a friendship that meant and means a lot to me. We would go for Turkish meals just at the other end of Gower Street. And yeah, I don't know, that intergenerational friendship, I think, isn't that common. And to have somebody like Vicky to meet with and to share life with was a great privilege. They were evenings full of kind of laughter and shared stories and really, really happy times. Yeah, and that side, I really saw her. I think others have spoken about it, her joy for life. And that way that you can push for and really give so much of your life to changing things and to building a better world, but still keep the lightness and the joy for life is something that I will take forward, hopefully, in my life. I remember one email she sent me, she told me she was going to a 3-hour theatre performance. She wasn't going to eat until midnight. And I was impressed by that. I would have been too hungry. So yeah, I don't know. There was so much I didn't know about Vicky. It's been really lovely to hear things said today and to read things written by her. I didn't know that she was friends with Hyman Minsky. But yeah, I think to summarize, Vicky is and was so fiercely committed, vastly wise and experienced, but not cynical, which I think is impressive, hugely energetic, and an inspiration to all of the young people across the world who are trying to build a better economics. And she said at the Vicky Chicken General Theory at 80, she asked me to reflect on the next 80 years, and I had no idea what would happen. And to be honest, the next 80 years are probably quite scary in lots of ways. But I know that if we can keep Vicky's spirit with us through that time, then we'll be better equipped to deal with whatever comes. So thanks, Vicky.
Okay, Julie asked us to introduce ourselves. I think I know quite a lot of you here, but for the sake of those who I haven't met, my name is Jan Toporowski. I'm an academic economist, a friend of Vicky's over many years. I'm not going to talk about Vicky's economics. There are other people, I think, who shared common perspectives with her, perhaps much more than I did, although we did share quite a lot. And I think there will be many other occasions, both today and in the coming months and years, in which Vicky's unique contribution to economics can be discussed, examined, and its implications, the implications of her ideas can be worked out. I wanted really today to talk more about her artistic interests and the way in which they fed into my artistic interests, and how, in many respects, I was influenced by her views on art and her aesthetic. I won't, by the way, talk about music because Andrew here is speaking later, and is more familiar with her tastes. Vicky very much followed Keynes in her aesthetic, in her search for what Bertrand Russell called fine shades and nice feelings. in a comment which Russell makes in his observations about Keynes, the young Keynes certainly, and his attitude towards art and beauty. And it's slightly contrasted with my own modernism. Before I knew Vicky, I had been very influenced by a Polish writer and a Polish painter, Wojciech Temerson. They were modernists. We later, as a result of our acquaintances in that circle, Anita Plasmowska, my wife, and I moved into Mal Studios, really a cradle of modernism, incidentally, where Barbara Hepworth, whom Vicky liked, whose work Vicky appreciated very, very much, where Barbara Hepworth had worked. So my view was slightly different. It was much more one that the purpose of art is to change people. You did it as part of a manifesto to change the way in which people viewed not only the world, but their lives as well. Vicky and I used to have lengthy telephone discussions on the latest exhibitions on the relative merits of different artists. And this also merged into looking at gardens, because we lived not far from her, beautiful gardens, because that was also part of the aesthetic. The three particular cases of artistic ideas which came over to me quite forcefully. Quite early on, there was an exhibition of art by the Dutch artist De Kuyp, and Vicky rang me up and said, you have to go and see these pictures. You have to see them. And I'd actually read the reviews of the exhibition, and I said, Vicky, I'm not going to go to an exhibition of pictures of cows. And Vicky said, oh no, if you think that that's what De Kuyp is, there is more to it. We argued about it. I went to see the pictures, and I was actually, I was impressed. It did change my view. I think a more, almost a more dramatic and much longer artistic experience, aesthetic experience, was being in Rome with Vicky. One time, Vicky had brought with her Architect's Guide to Rome, and invites. It's now out of print. I tried to get a copy afterwards. It's a unique guide to a city that is architecturally unique. But there was more to the occasion than just walking around Rome, looking at the buildings. We were taken around by Minsky's daughter, Diana Minsky, an art historian, who explained how Rome was transformed from Republican Rome to Imperial Rome, and then becomes the prototype of all future imperial capitals. It was also a most extraordinary occasion, and it's something and an occasion which has left me actually unable to stand in capital cities and look at them in quite the same way again. perhaps my third case was when I went to Madrid. I was going to Madrid for an academic occasion, academic conference, but I wanted to go to the Prado because I wanted to see the Goyas. Of course, Goya, looking forward to 20th century art. But Vicky said that while I was in the Prado, I had to see the pictures. I had to see the pictures and bring back as many as possible reproductions, postcard reproductions of the paintings of Luis Melendez. Why was Luis Melendez important? Because Luis Melendez was a still life painter. He'd been commissioned by the Prince of Asturias, later King Charles IV of Spain, to paint a series of pictures which, in their ambition, the ambition was to paint every fruit and vegetable in Spain. And I got as many of these postcards as I possibly could for her. Some of them I got for myself as well, because, and I have them somewhere. But it was an occasion where I think her deep knowledge, a deep sensibility, really about art, communicated itself wonderfully, changed my outlook on life, possibly changed my economics as well. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name's Ruth Potts, and I wanted to share a few recollections about Vicky, what Vicky meant to me as a friend. But listening to some of the things that people have said so far, at the beginning, Julie said that Vicky dedicated her life to being as much Victoria Chick as she could possibly be. Not only do I love that, I also think that listening to what people have said, she was pretty bloody good at it. So Vicky was an extraordinary friend, and I am so delighted to have had the pleasure of having her in my life. I first met Vicky when I was working for the New Economics Foundation. And in the aftermath of the 2007-2008 crash, we were coordinating a letter in response to 20 economists who had written to the Times in support of austerity. Vicky's reply to my email was curt. It was the email equivalent of the glare that Julie described. She might consider signing the letter if I corrected the grammar. I apologized profusely, corrected the grammar, and Vicky lost no time in encouraging other economists to sign. Again, the generosity that so many have noted in Vicky. For the 100th anniversary of the birth of the economist E.S. Schumacher, we organised an event at the South Bank Centre in London, where Vicky was joined on stage by her friend, Professor Jayati Ghosh. Writing later in The Guardian, Vicky said, for Keynes, solving the economic problem was merely a precondition for being able to concentrate on higher values. For Schumacher, work should be part of the good life itself. The cultivation of friendship, the enjoyment of the arts, participation in useful work, caring for others, the pursuit of self-fulfillment, and enabling the fulfillment of others were examples of the things that really mattered, not the acquisition of goods beyond basic needs. Well, Vicky's life's work was dedicated to Keynes. I think she lived as Schumacher suggested the good life should be lived. And aside from her towering intellect, it was her deep appreciation of the joys of life that set Vicky apart from other economists. With apologies to the economists gathered here today, I'm sure many of you know how to have fun too. As Jayati reflected, and I really hope she won't mind me relaying her words, I hope she's watching in. Vicky has been such an inspiration to me over the years, even before I got to know her. Not only her formidable intellect and major theoretical contributions, but her commitment and integrity. And then when I got to know her, wow, such an amazing person in every way, and so strong and lively and modest with all of that. Vicky had a huge appetite for life in all of its aspects. As others have mentioned, she was an incredible exhibition companion, deeply knowledgeable, but always attentive to my much less informed observations. At an exhibition of sculpture at the Royal Academy, I lamented my lack of knowledge. She then very generously responded that at her then 80 to my then 40, she had 40 years more experience than I did. She loved good food and good wine. She loved good food and good wine, even though I'm sure that she ate pretty badly when she was working. She once told me that she kept a loaf of bread and a bread knife in her desk drawer for when she was working late. She loved company and she loved to laugh, and she had an amazing laugh. She seized life and was extraordinarily generous in her support of younger economists. You've already heard from Jo of her enthusiastic support of Rethinking Economics and the Manchester Post-Crash Economic Society. She was also impressed by and supportive of many young economists, but I'm going to name one in particular. She was very supportive of Beth Stratford, who dedicated her PhD to Vicky, and Beth is with us today. Beth has recently been awarded her PhD with no corrections. But more than that, Beth has asked if she can make corrections. And so they are looking into it to see whether they can still award her a PhD with no corrections if she's made the corrections herself. And I think Vicky would have absolutely loved that. And Vicky's intellectual curiosity wasn't limited to economics. As you know, Vicky sang in a choir until her diaphragm started to weaken, and she wasn't able to sing in the way that she wanted to. I'm sure her voice was still extraordinary. It just wasn't as good as she would have liked it to be. So I once excitedly relayed to Vicky research that showed that when people sing in a choir, your heartbeat falls into sync. Vicky reflected for a moment, and then she said she thought it was more than that. She thought that when people sing in a choir, it created a morphic resonance. I'm not sure whether many of you know of the work of Rupert Sheldrake, but I was surprised that Vicky agreed with it. I'm something of a Sheldrake skeptic, but in reflection, I think Vicky might have been right about morphic resonance. There's something about the idea that we might connect into some kind of collective memory by singing together that rings true. At the very least, singing together is a powerful and uplifting reminder of our inescapable interconnection. An interconnection that Vicky enthusiastically pursued in so many aspects of her life. She was serious and dedicated and principled and fun, and the world is a little grayer at her passing. Except that all of us who loved her and are gathered here and watching around the world are duty bound to keep her spirit alive. Let's make sure that we do.
my name's Andrew Sims, and I think you're all probably a little bit cold and a little bit damp, but at the same time, oh my word, the warmth in this room is quite extraordinary. Really nice to see you all. I got to know Vicky while I was policy director at the New Economics Foundation around the same time that Ruth did, and around the time that we jointly wrote with some of the other people in the room the Green New Deal. And I don't really actually have much to say, but that on that list of the things that you do that make you happy, spending time with Vicky was one of them. She was one of those people that Ruth alluded to as well, that Keynes wrote about, who cultivate the art of life itself. And it was just conversation was the best. Because, you know, some people you have a bit of a laugh with. With Vicky, before, and if you were out having a really good meal, probably spit food all over the table at the same time. She had this kind of massive, big, open heart, and was full of curiosity, spiced with rigor, as everybody has said. And after we hooked up with Vicky over that Economist letter, Nev, and the anniversary of Schumacher, we invited her to sort of imagine a fusion of Keynes and Schumacher, if ever there was something really needed in this world at the moment. And she kind of sort of dived right in and appeared as a Guardian op-ed. And she was also brilliantly helpful when Bruce and I co-wrote a pamphlet called The New Materialism. And she sort of spotted that quite unintentionally, we'd come up with a sort of thesis of dissolving the distinctions between producer and consumer. And she thought that was really interesting and kind of dived right in. So she was quite enormous fun and engaged. And just before Vicky left us, I was writing her a little entertainment to amuse her about two things. The strikes were kicking off earlier in the year. And Rishi Sunak had just announced that there was going to be compulsory maths up to 18 in schools. And I thought Vicky would have scoffed at that. I don't know why, but I just thought she would. And I suspect there are quite a few economists in the room, but Vicky was the great scholar of Keynes. And you kind of think he was sort of more into words than numbers. And anyway, we ran out of time, and I never got a chance to read it to Vicky, so I thought I'd do so now. And just to sort of manage your expectations, it's just a stupid little ditty called Maths. And it goes like this. The numbers weren't working, had gone on strike. Economists were exploiting them in a system they didn't like. Asked to increase their hours in a calculated move with no more pay or benefits, in some, an average fractious ruse. Deprived of having values, forbidden to infinity breaks, chained to unpaid overtime by bosses on the make. 0 to 9 put down their tools, would not add or multiply. Cried, you're not dividers, we've got primes, composites and pi. We're more than straightforward digits, slaves to competition and markets. We're music, Fibonacci and beauty, not just your boot wiping carpets. So greed ground to a standstill, the footsie tamed like a pussy. The numbers 1 began counting down to life minus meanness plus cushy. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Jesper Jespersen. I come from, well, Scandinavia, or more precisely from Roskilde University in Denmark. But I think I can speak on nearly all the post-Keynesians in Scandinavia, because we have, of course, got a lot of inspiration from Vicky. And I'm surprised that it has not been mentioned during the speeches this afternoon that Vicky was one of the initiative takers of the post-Keynesian study group in this country, which I felt was so instrumental and so important for young scholars at that time. And we are all the way back in 88. And we have set up kind of branch of the post-Keynesian study group in Scandinavia and meet every third year, and with a lot of inspiration from this initiative. And we were lucky, the very first meeting or conference, Vicky was, of course, invited, and she came and was always significant. Then, unfortunately, Vicky stopped traveling abroad. It was around the year 2000, so we couldn't persuade her to come over and, well, be a president of the meetings, but of course always with a sincere interest in what was going on in Scandinavia. So that was important from a broader point of view. And then I have more personal experiences, as all of us have here. And well, Vicky was exceptional. And I have been watching the screen here, and here we have the lady. Isn't she fantastic? She is fantastic. But there is one picture, in fact, there was a couple of pictures showing Vicky at a rather young age, squeezed in between two older men. On one side, we had Frank Hahn. On the other side, Paul Samuelson. And one can see Vicky feeling somewhat uneasy in this company. But, and I think that is something which has happened to many of us post-Keynesian economics. We started being taught conventionally with ISLM diagram and all this, may I say, rubbish. I do dare say rubbish, because it couldn't explain reality. And I can see Vicky against, but and if you read her very short self-biography, which is published in the volume called Dissenting Economists, and edited by Malcolm Sawyer and Philip Aristis, well, there is just on 4 pages where she explained her development from being, well, interested into economics, but disgraced by not having something which could explain what's going on outside the windows. And then, well, she fortunately had a number of more teachers with more inspiration, and Hyman Minsky was one of them. And then she went to Old England, and you can read further on. But I think that it captured the development many of us have had in economics. At least I can speak for myself. Well, and not only speaking for myself, but if you read Keynes, he started as a neoclassical economist, sitting by the foot of the professors in Cambridge, Marshall at that time, and then you can read how he converted little by little. And here is one of my points. What really made the difference for Vicky, for Keynes, and me, is methodology, the method. When she realized that, well, what the main message of Keynes is that if you don't is able to establish a methodology which can capture reality, when you are trapped. And trapped for other reasons, but you are trapped so you cannot really go deeply into reality. And the catchword here, I think for all of us, at least all post-Keynesians, is of course uncertainty. And that really makes a difference. And when you read Keynes, you cannot be in doubt that that has an important impact. But that was not a part of the syllabus at the universities at that time. So And Vicky, well, is approximately, or was, is, she's still here, 10 years older than me. And in her understanding of Keynes, understanding of the economics of reality, the economics of uncertainty, well, I could just sit by her feet and listen where she were. And of course, the book Macroeconomics After Keynes is really an eye-opener. And then she developed, and I was just following behind as good as I could. So bottom line, she was a pioneer in establishing the importance of methodology in economics. And so that's what I've learned. And I've learned much more, but this is really the essence. And Vicky, well, you have to learn her to know, and you have to be accepted by Vicky. And it took, well, let's say for me, 15 years or something like that. But then we were asked to edit a handbook on macroeconomic methodology. Yeah, well, I have to confess, it's 10 years ago, and a number of European president has contributed, and it is now under its way. And it is in press. And fortunately, Vicky succeeded in reading through all papers and also to accept our introduction to this handbook, which will be appearing in September. So really, and many times I've urged her, I said, why don't you write a book? Why don't you make a manifestation, macroeconomic after Keynes, volume 2, or reconsidered? Because 30 years has gone. Now I said, oh, there's so much else to do, yes, Brian, and these things. But she really engaged in this handbook and macroeconomic methodology. So that is her, well, not testimonial, but really the imprint of Vicky in this area. So thank you for that. The second thing I just want to mention is why became Vicky such a dear friend. Because I felt myself taken seriously talking with Vicky. And it would be extremely helpful, but she could also be very direct. I can hear her saying, Jesper, you cannot mean that. I was really thought back, and then she started to explain why I really couldn't mean that. And sometimes with rather loud voice, I can tell you. But I listened, and in economics, I must say, she was not always right, but really she was a front runner to me. So I have benefited, learned a lot, and I'm very grateful for that. And therefore, well, fortunately, I have had the opportunity to say thank you to Vicky at many occasions, although she was a very modest person and said, no, you've done it yourself. No, I haven't. But anyway, thank you, and thank you for listening.
So I'm Jeff Tiley, and I was Vicky's last PhD student. Vicky tells in the biographical essay that Jesper has just talked about how her descent was initially unexpected. And I quote, "How odd that the mere insistence on double entry bookkeeping could put one into the position of being a dissenting economist." In her dissent, she single-handedly, initially, called out the phony debate between Keynesians and monetarists as irrelevant to the actual questions we should be addressing. She would later dismiss new Keynesian economics as pathetically shallow. Ultimately, she was a Keynes scholar with no peer, sustaining the most sophisticated and important, but not dogmatic, defense of the general theory. She drew strength from an emerging dissenting community. She then became a vital centre of gravity for the same community. With Philip Orestes, she set up the Post-Keynesian Study Group. She was a leading figure in the Association for Heterodox Economics. She supported the French students, the Real World Economic Review, Positive Money, and all manner of dissenting initiative. Above all, perhaps, the student movement. Her true plurality meant collaborations with scholars from all schools of thought. My coming into her orbit was up to a point good fortune. Having decided to retrain as an economist, my imagination couldn't see beyond UCL, where I did my undergraduate degree in statistics. So almost exactly 25 years ago, I signed up for her economic methodology option. In spite of their banning her from teaching macroeconomics to undergraduates, the UCL authorities could not prevent her from offering a master's option. The passport to my PhD was then an incredibly naive MSc dissertation, which rather rubbished the orthodox doctrine on inequality. I fear it nearly cost me my master's, but it won me Vicky as a supervisor. And it was a good time. Above all, I joined the community of dissent, certain members of which, Stephanie Blankenberg, Roy Rothheim, and the greatly missed Jeff Harcourt, were vital to securing the passage of the work against a little bit of orthodox resistance. She introduced me to a literature and a world that is incredibly interesting and inspiring. Pity the poor mainstream economists who think Keynes scholarship has nothing to offer them, what riches they are missing, as Vicky wrote. And I have been privileged by unique education in economics. Above all, as Jesper just said, she gave you belief in yourself. If you can get thinking past Vicky, likely it's not bad thinking. And you've got to enjoy the company of this unique personality. Having just spent the weekend celebrating Sheila Dow's immense contribution, it was a great pleasure to find that everybody has their favourite Vicky story. In everyday life, as well as in economics, her observations were acute and devastating. After my PhD viva, she summed up my performance in one word as thin. My own favourite story concerns a meeting with a handful of senior politicians. Afterwards, the policy wonk who had arranged the occasion was absolutely stunned by her performance, and he gave us some guff about how she just turned the dial on policy. When he cleared off, Vicky said only, "Someone that greasy should not wear their shirt buttons undone." And she was so right. You know, this guy was so distracted. But it wasn't all give. It was a two-way street. As a chick apprentice, you were forever obliged both practical and academic tasks. I don't have time to get started on her bloody books. She commissioned essays, required conferences and conference volumes, and she liked to take a close interest in proceedings. Very pluralist maybe, but I found her very difficult to disagree with, at least on the subject of Keynes. My amateur psychoanalysis is that she couldn't remove the armour that she needed for the battle with the mainstream. If it turns out that an abstract theory of a real exchange economy does not capture the reality of a monetary production economy, the importance of this battle is no trivial matter. Maybe finally our apprenticeships are over, but of course our work is not done. I apologise in advance for bringing the tone down. I've always enjoyed Michael Moore's account of his fuck you money. As a successful filmmaker, he tells us how he can do what he likes without having to grovel to any financier or banker. So I am thrilled to announce on behalf of the executors that we're about to get some fuck you money of our own. Vicky has left her estate to dissenting economics to be deployed by the committee of the Post-Keynesian Economic Society. I will close and urge inspiration in this task with a final remark from the recent paper with Alan Freeman, who spoke earlier, which plays, in spite of everything, to her immense positivity. In moving from the economics of excess to the economics of enough, our only loss will be the words crisis and crash.
And possibly the word economist from the dictionaries of tomorrow. Thank you.
I'm going to tell one more Vicky story, which I just only found out when I was going through some of her papers. Her papers are going to go to Goldsmiths, her archives. So if you want to do research later on, they will be there. I found in a letter to a friend where she was telling him to be more patient with the behavior of his adult son and try to see it from his point of view. She said, not conforming has its costs, I ought to know. But if it doesn't sound too like too much of a claim, you get things back for it. And one of them is your soul. So our last toast is to the beloved and immortal and wonderful soul and well kept, I think, soul of Victoria Chick.